Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Hey, I'm back. Gonna be back. So a little bit of a quieter Sunday here on the Aaron Torres Pod and Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. No new full episode on Sunday, potentially one on Monday. I'm doing Fox Sports Radio Sunday night as well as Monday midday. So one, make sure to check me out. I'll be with Dan Byer on Monday from 3 to 7 Eastern time. But I bring it up because a little bit of a quieter time. But there is something I do want to talk about very quickly because, as I said last week, high school basketball recruiting, college basketball recruiting is really, in my opinion, going to start to ramp up here in the next few weeks. Peach Jam is now just a couple weeks away. What about two and a half weeks away? It goes on right around the same time as SEC Media Days. And so I bring it up because guess what's going to start happening after that? Kids are going to start cutting their lists. They're going to start setting up visits if they haven't already. Schools kind of know, hey, who's that group of players that we're recruiting? And kids start to know, okay, who are the schools that I am seriously considering as well. So this is all going to happen fast. It's all going to happen furious. We're going to get a lot of commitments probably in August, September, October, leading into signing day, early signing period in November. But I bring it up because over the last couple of days, I really think we actually got not one, but two very interesting updates on one of the top players in the class of 2025, a kid by the name of Darryn Peterson. 6'5" guard, the number 3 ranked player in the class of 2025. And let me just say this. There has been a perceived leader for quite some time, but I think there might be a new school just lurking in the weeds, ready to make a jump, a pounce, or whatever. And potentially, I'm not saying that there's definitively a change in this thing, but his dad did a couple interesting interviews, certainly one on Saturday, that I think is at least worth diving into here for just a few minutes. Before we get into it, let me first of all say this. Darryn Peterson is a phenomenal prospect, okay? Listen, I think I try to be fair with all of these kids. And some, are projects. They're this, they're that, they're whatever. Darryn Peterson's just a stud. 6'5", really just an elite guard who can basically do everything. Can handle the ball, creates for others, creates for himself, 3-level scorer, can finish at the rim, great athleticism, great defender, great two-way player. He's a kid that he looks the part of a lottery pick. I don't say that about everybody. And I think what stands out, I just don't think he gets enough attention because of the fact that this 2025 class is so elite. We have AJ DeBonsa, who we've been talking about, Cameron Boozer, we've been talking about. So I only bring it up. I feel like this kid is a little bit underrated, but let's get into the updates in his recruitment because for a while, first of all, going into the spring, it felt like it was really kind of down to two schools, okay? Kansas has always been in the mix with him. And then early on, before John Calipari left, it felt like Kentucky was very much in the mix for him as well. Well, Calipari leaves. I think the family kind of takes a step back. And over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten some interesting, again, updates. First of all, did take a visit to Kansas. By all accounts, went well. Not surprised. Bill Self is a great recruiter. I was in Lawrence back in December. It's a great college campus. Fog Allen is an incredible place to play. And in case you haven't heard, Kansas is a pretty good college basketball program, okay? So that visit, by all accounts, went well. He is also set to visit Ohio State in the coming weeks. He is originally from Ohio. He now plays at Huntington Prep down in West Virginia, but he's originally from Ohio. So Ohio State obviously believes that they have a shot. And then really the first kind of major update in his recruitment was about 4 or 5 days ago. His dad sat down with Joe Tipton from On3, said that in addition to those 2 visits, there were 4 other schools that he believed his son would be visiting at some point in the future. Kentucky, Louisville, USC, and Washington. Now, I think the thing that about that group stands out the most, it does kind of feel like Arkansas is fading. Now, in the Joe Tipton article, he did reference Arkansas. We've known Coach Calipari. We've known Chin Coleman forever. But I do wonder if there's not going to be a visit for Arkansas, does it mean that they're starting to fade? And I think that also means something that we talked about last week, which this is probably a direct reflection of Darius Acuff emerging as a guy for Arkansas as a priority recruit at the point guard position. If you missed that clip, we talked about Darius Acuff, number 4 player in the class of 2025. He is the number 1 point guard. I think depending on what recruiting service you look at, Darryn Peterson is listed as more of a combo guard. But I just bring it up because Arkansas not getting a visit would seemingly eliminate them, even though, again, the family said that, of course, they're still being recruited by Arkansas. To me, don't think that's necessarily a bad thing for Arkansas, though, because I think it means that you're in the mix with Darius Acuff and that you're probably going to get him probably pretty soon. Darius Acuff, by the way, since we updated that list, has cut his list to 4, although there is no, there is seemingly no decision date on the table, at least right now for Acuff. But let's get back to Darryn Peterson, because in addition to that new list of 4, I think what's interesting is all 4 of those schools have new head coaches. Mark Pope at Kentucky, Pat Kelsey at Louisville, Eric Musselman at USC, and of course, Danny Sprinkle at Washington. What was also interesting was that on Saturday, Darryn Peterson's dad, Darryn Peterson, did a sit-down with Jacob Polchek from Kentucky Sports Radio talking about Kentucky specifically. And if you read the tea leaves, that's where I'm starting to think that Mark Pope may be starting to make his move. Now, obviously, Mark Pope, to his credit, has done everything, in my opinion, right early on in his time at Kentucky. Put together a dynamite staff with Alvin Brooks III, Jason Hart, a guy that I really respect a lot, know pretty well from his time on the West Coast, Cody Feger. Put together a dynamic roster, recruited the portal well, put together a balanced, deep team that I think is going to play well once they take the court. And oh, by the way, he did a great job in the high school ranks convincing Trent Noah once he was let out of his letter of intent, 4-star player to come to Kentucky, a Kentucky high school kid. So Mark Pope's done just about everything right. But the one big thing, can he land those difference-making X-factor guys at the high school level? Because at the end of the day, college basketball, we can say a lot of things. It's getting older. It's a portal sport. It's whatever. You still win with elite NBA talent. And I still think you kind of got to figure out a way to mix those guys in. Even UConn this year, they had veterans, but they had Steph Castle. 2 years ago, they had veterans, but they had Donovan Clingan, who could have easily been a one and done. So you got to be able to develop, you got to be able to find that NBA talent, plug it in with your roster. And so let's get into what Darryn Peterson's dad said to Kentucky Sports Radio on Saturday. First off, gave the old line of Kentucky was always Darren's dream school. So we don't need to overanalyze that. If you're a Kentucky fan, you know that basically every high school player in the last probably 10 years has said Kentucky's a dream school. And by the way, it should have been. Getting an offer from Kentucky, going to Kentucky, it essentially assured you were going to get drafted into the NBA. So of course it's a dream school because because if you're good enough to play at Kentucky under John Calipari, it means that you are probably going to be a future millionaire in the NBA. So that doesn't surprise me. We've heard that line before, but I thought what was more interesting was Darryn Peterson's dad, talking about the rebuilding of the relationship with Kentucky. He said they've got us excited about Kentucky basketball. Darryn, his son, is excited about Kentucky basketball. And he kind of talked about it's the tradition and platform at Kentucky. We're excited about Kentucky. And so to me, that's a good sign because first of all, it's important to know this recruitment is pretty far along. As I said, Darryn Peterson has had a relationship with Bill Self for probably 2.5 years now, and obviously the Kansas staff as well. He's had a relationship with John Calipari and that Kentucky staff for 2.5 years. So for Mark Pope to come in, quickly build that relationship, quickly convince this kid that this is the place where you need to play, I take it as a very good sign. Now, the important thing, because Darryn Peterson's dad did open up and say, listen, there is one thing more than anything else that is going to matter in this recruitment. And it's like most recruitments. This isn't, breaking news here, but it's like, how are you going to use our son? I believe that, I being Darryn Peterson's dad, he says he believes that he's a point guard. This is exactly what he said about it. He said, basically, my son's a point guard. How are you going to use him? This is the exact quote from KSR. He said, in Darryn's situation, all the schools have the same nice gyms, same nice facilities, and Hall of Fame coaches. Every school has that at this point. Now it's just the little things, the environment, style of play, and the belief they have in Darryn. He continued, we want those coaches saying, hey, we want Darryn as a point guard, and we're going to put the ball in his hands. The main thing is believing in Darryn and giving him an opportunity to be who he is. Well, listen, there it is right there. And that to me is the kind of money quote in this article and in this interview is, how do schools envision this kid and how do they envision using him? And so what'll be interesting to see is how Mark Pope, how Pat Kelsey, how Bill Self, whoever else is in the mix, Eric Musselman at USC, how they get this kid involved and how do they believe in him and how do they envision him. Now, it is worth noting, as I said, I still think if we're being transparent, I think Kansas has to be deemed the favorite. Just took a visit. By all accounts, it went well. And there's a couple other factors. One, they've had the relationship with Bill Self for 2.5 years, whatever it's been. And of course, I think a lot of people know this, but Darryn Peterson, of course, has an NIL deal with Adidas. There is no more high-profile Adidas program than the Kansas Jayhawks, at least in college basketball. So it'll be interesting. What'll be curious is that Darryn Peterson's dad did say that this thing might get sped up. So his exact quote was, it seems like a decision is going to be sped up. I was thinking more about taking our time. It's not about rushing it. This is a huge decision, so I want to find the right fit. Now, after talking with Darryn and our family, we're trying to get these visits tackled down soon because it seems like Darryn, his son, wants to commit sooner rather than later. Found that to be an interesting little update. And I'll be curious, can Kentucky get back in the mix? But it's really not just Kentucky. It's Louisville. Can Pat Kelsey get in the mix? Listen, this guy, Darryn Peterson's dad told you exactly what we want. How are you going to use my son? What position are you going to put him in? Are you going to put the ball in his hands and let him cook? Well, Louisville obviously is going to have opportunities. USC, of course, is a veteran-laden team, but also worth noting, by the way, guess who loses their point guard as well? Kentucky's going to lose 2 fifth-year point guards next year in Lamont Butler and Kirk Risa. Kansas is going to lose their point guard in DeJuan Harris. So it's just going to be interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. Interesting update, interesting conversation from his dad. And I'll just kind of wrap by saying this. Two really quick things. One, I do think Mark Pope's actually starting to do a pretty good job of kind of rebuilding relationships with the 2025 kids. Saw Braylon Mullins, a fast-rising kid. He's a 4-star now. I think he'll be a 5-star when it's all said and done. Just got an offer from Kentucky, has already set up an official visit. That's a kid that UConn and Dan Hurley want, that Mike Woodson and Indiana want. So if UConn and Dan Hurley want him and Indiana wants him, you know he's a good player. He raved about his visit to Kentucky earlier this week. But I think more than anything, it just proves to me, Mark Pope is going to be a factor with these high-profile 5-stars. He's got ground to make up in this particular case. But if you're a Kentucky fan, I would not worry because I believe Kentucky is going to be just fine in the bigger picture. But that's your Sunday, mid-June Darryn Peterson update. And we'll see if we get anything interesting on this in the coming days and weeks. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure to subscribe to the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. College hoops, college football, etc. Also, if you are a Kentucky fan, make sure you're following our Torres on UK account. And of course, oh, by the way, if you're a Kentucky fan, you got to get yourself that Hope and Pope, Mark Pope t-shirt available at AaronTorresOnline.com. As I said, we'll be back with a full episode probably sometime late Monday.